Welcome to the Daily English Practice channel.
It is so great to be here.
We are absolutely thrilled to have you joining us today. Let's start right off with a bit of a reality check.
Oh, I love a good reality check.
Right, so I want you to think about your current relationship with the English language. Just consider your daily routine for a second.
Like what you do every day.
Exactly. You can probably handle a coffee shop order without breaking a sweat, right?
Sure.
You can likely sit through a quarterly business review at work, catch the main action points, and, well, maybe even chime in.
Yeah, you follow the conversation.
And you can probably fire up a streaming service, watch a thriller, and follow the plot twists without constantly rewinding.
Which is a huge achievement, by the way.
Oh, absolutely. But if you are being entirely honest with yourself, do you ever get that lingering sensation that you are hitting an invisible wall?
That invisible wall is so frustrating.
It really is.
Yeah.
Deep down, you know you don't quite sound like a native speaker.
Right.
I mean, you have memorized the grammar rules, you know your verb conjugations.
You've done the work.
But when you open your mouth to express a really complex thought, the delivery feels clunky.
Like you're buffering.
Yes, it feels like you are rapidly translating from your mother tongue in real time.
Which you probably are.
If that resonates with you, you are dealing with a very specific, incredibly frustrating hurdle, and you are exactly in the right place today to figure out how to clear it.
Because that sensation of hitting an invisible wall, it's actually a perfectly documented stage of language acquisition.
It has a name.
It does. Educators and linguists refer to it as the intermediate plateau.
The intermediate plateau.
Yeah. Think about when you first start learning a language.
Mm.
The trajectory is just exhilarating.
You learn so much so fast.
Exactly. You go from zero to basic communication very quickly. The landscape is steep, but you see yourself climbing every single day.
Right.
Then, somewhere around the upper intermediate level, the terrain suddenly flattens out.
You hit the plateau.
You might be putting in the exact same amount of daily effort, reviewing your materials, trying to speak, but you feel like you're wandering across a vast, flat plain without gaining any real elevation.
And that is the exact feeling we are targeting for today's deep dive.
We're going to break it down.
We are looking at the mechanics of breaking through that plateau. For those of you familiar with the common European framework of reference for languages, we are dissecting the jump from B2.
That's the capable, independent user.
Right. To C1.
The advanced, highly proficient user.
And we have pulled together an incredibly robust stack of sources to figure out how this is actually done.
A really great stack today.
Yeah, we are looking at pedagogical articles from the British Council, some intense strategic frameworks from Oxford Online English, and resource guides highlighting the best of BBC Learning English.
Plus, we have some academic testing strategies from ITES.
Which stands for the Inter-University Test of Academic English.
Very official.
And we are even going to look at a targeted study guide based on Jonah Berger's fascinating best-selling book, Contagious.
It is a really comprehensive map we have laid out today.
It is.
Because we are looking at the architecture of language learning from a high-performance perspective.
Right, this isn't just basic advice.
No, this isn't about handing you a new vocabulary list and wishing you luck. We are going to examine the cognitive science behind how you study.
How your brain processes complex linguistic input.
Exactly. And what specific habits you need to build.
Or break.
Or break, yes, to completely rewire your mind for advanced fluency.
So let's start by looking closer at this intermediate plateau, because the British Council source paints a very familiar picture of the typical B2 student.
It's almost too familiar.
I know, right? At this stage, you possess a solid active vocabulary. You can basically get by.
But that ability to get by is actually a double-edged sword.
How so?
Well, when you were a beginner, you had a desperate survival-level need to learn the word for train ticket or grocery store.
You literally couldn't function without them.
Right. But now, because you can comfortably navigate most situations, that intense survival-based motivation naturally drops off.
You get comfortable.
You get comfortable. And when you get comfortable, you start recycling what the British Council calls hackneyed grammar.
Hackneyed grammar.
It's a major roadblock. It basically means the learner relies heavily on safe, familiar sentence structures.
They know it works, so they just keep using it.
Relentlessly. Even when a more nuanced or elegant structure would be way better.
Right.
But the more insidious trap is how they assemble their vocabulary.
Because they're translating directly.
Yes. B2 learners often produce language that is technically grammatically correct, but completely unnatural to a native ear.
And I found the examples in the research absolutely brilliant for illustrating this.
They're pretty funny.
They mentioned a student trying to summarize a long story. Instead of using the common idiom in a nutshell,
Which is what you'd expect.
the student said, "in the shell of a nut."
In the shell of a nut.
Or another student trying to describe conquering a phobia, who proudly stated, "I have overtaken the fear of driving."
Overtaken the fear, instead of saying, I have overcome the fear.
Exactly. Now, as a native speaker, if someone tells me a story in the shell of a nut, I know exactly what they mean.
Of course.
But there is this microscopic pause in the conversation.
Yes.
My brain has to do a little double take.
And that microscopic pause is everything. It is a slight cognitive stutter for the listener.
A cognitive stutter.
Yeah. And when the listener stutters, the speaker often perceives a lack of connection,
Or they assume they made a glaring mistake.
which just breeds frustration. And this happens because the intermediate learner is still treating English like an algebra equation.
Like plug and play math.
Right. They think, okay, I need the concept of summary. The word for summary is nutshell. I will take nut, shell, and the preposition in and add them all together.
But language isn't math.
No, it's not. To break the plateau, you have to fundamentally shift how you view vocabulary. You have to recognize what linguists call lexical chunks.
Or collocation.
Collocations, exactly. What's fascinating here is a phrase in the British Council materials that perfectly sums this up. They say, words hunt in packs.
Words hunt in packs. I love that. So if I'm a learner listening right now, does this mean my entire strategy of making flashcards for individual, isolated vocabulary words has been a complete waste of time?
Well, no, not a waste of time for a beginner,
Okay, phew.
because you needed those foundational building blocks.
Yeah.
But at the B2 level, yes, learning isolated words is severely limiting your progress.
Interesting.
If you learn the word vigorous completely on its own, your brain has to work incredibly hard to figure out where to place it in a sentence on the fly.
Right in the middle of a conversation.
Exactly. Fluency is not actually about how fast your brain can compute grammar rules and assemble individual words.
What is it about then?
True fluency relies on having a massive database of prefabricated items, these lexical chunks.
Already stored and ready to deploy.
Yes. So if the phrase in a nutshell is stored as one single unbroken unit in your brain, you don't have to spend any mental energy assembling it.
It's just one piece.
Right. You can spend that energy focusing on the actual complex idea you're trying to communicate.
So it's really about reducing the cognitive load.
Precisely. And because you are deploying a prefabricated chunk, your stress and intonation naturally mimic a native speaker.
Oh, because you aren't pausing between the individual words to think.
Exactly.
Okay, let's make this highly practical for you listening. The research breaks down these word packs into specific categories of collocations.
Because it is not just about learning colorful idioms.
Right. It is about knowing which everyday words naturally stick together. Take verb and noun combinations.
The classic one.
You don't make a party, you throw a party.
And you don't take responsibility for an error. You accept responsibility.
Exactly. Then you have adjective and noun combinations.
Like grim determination.
Right. You don't just have determination to finish a project. You have grim determination.
And you don't just eat a meal that is shaped like a square.
You eat a square meal, which implies a proper, nutritionally complete dinner.
And they stack on top of each other, too.
Right. The text looks at verb plus adjective plus noun.
So you don't just do hard exercise.
You take vigorous exercise.
And you don't go forward safely.
You make steady progress.
Adverb and adjective combinations are a particularly strong marker of C1 proficiency, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah. You aren't just amazed by a magic trick. You are utterly amazed.
Utterly amazed.
A broken tool isn't just bad. It is completely useless.
Completely useless. And then there is the category that seems to trip up almost every advanced learner I know.
Adjective plus preposition.
Yes. You are guilty of a crime, not guilty for.
You are blamed for a mistake, but you are happy about a situation.
There's rarely a logical rule for these prepositions. They just
hunt in packs.
They hunt in packs.
Which means the role of the learner has to evolve here. The pedagogical shift is moving from rote memorization to what the British Council calls consciousness raising.
Consciousness raising.
There is a fundamental rule in language acquisition. No noticing, no acquisition.
If you don't notice it, you don't learn it.
Right. If you are reading an article and you don't actively train your brain to notice that the word utterly is sitting right next to amazed, you will never acquire that collocation.
You have to become the manager of your own learning outside of the classroom.
Exactly.
I really like that framing. But that brings us to a difficult question about study habits, which the Oxford Online English Strategies tackle head on.
This is where it gets real.
Yeah. If I am supposed to be this active learning manager noticing all these collocations, what does a study session actually look like?
Good question.
Because a lot of people think studying means putting an English movie on Netflix, turning on the subtitles, and hoping that after 2 hours they will have absorbed C1 level fluency by osmosis.
That passive absorption myth is exactly what keeps people trapped on the intermediate plateau.
It just doesn't work.
No. The Oxford strategies introduce a vital framework for breaking this habit. They categorize language practice into two incredibly strict buckets.
High-intensity practice and low-intensity practice.
Right. If you want to make the jump to advanced English, you have to treat this like an athletic training program.
Athletic training.
Yeah, you wouldn't expect to run a marathon just by casually walking to your car every day. You need targeted stress on the system.
Okay, let's define this high-intensity practice because the criteria they lay out are unforgiving.
They are very strict.
First, it demands 100% of your cognitive focus.
Zero distractions.
You cannot have your phone on the desk. You cannot be cooking dinner.
Second, it has to be strictly time limited.
Right. The Oxford researchers suggest something like 15 minutes.
You cannot maintain this level of focus for 2 hours. Your brain will simply shut off.
Third, the goal is total comprehension.
Meaning you are actively trying to understand absolutely every single word, collocation, and grammatical structure in a short piece of text or audio.
You are pausing. You are consulting a dictionary.
You are repeating that exact same 15-minute exercise multiple times.
And there is a secret ingredient here too, right?
The non-negotiable element. Feedback.
Feedback.
If you do not have a mechanism to verify that your understanding is correct, you are not doing high-intensity practice.
You might just be aggressively reinforcing your own mistakes.
Exactly. If you are doing a listening exercise, you must have the transcript to check what you missed.
Or if you were doing an IELTS academic reading test.
You must have the answer key to understand why you got a question wrong.
So a real-world example of this would be taking a short, complex, technical article. You read it once and it feels like a struggle.
Right.
Then you go back, look up all the unknown collocations, figure out the grammatical structures, and then read it a third time to cement that new knowledge.
Or listening to a fast-paced song twice, trying to transcribe the lyrics yourself.
Oh, that's a good one.
And then comparing your transcription to the official lyrics online to see exactly where your ear failed you.
That is the heavy lifting.
It is. Now, we have to contrast that with low-intensity practice, which is the exact opposite end of the spectrum.
This is where the Netflix and popcorn come back in, right?
Yes, but with a strategic purpose.
Okay.
Low-intensity practice is relaxed, open-ended exposure. The rules here are completely inverted.
So you do not worry about understanding every single word.
You do not stop to use a dictionary.
Because the cognitive stress is so low, you can sustain this for hours.
Right. The examples they give for this are things like having a podcast running in your car during your morning commute.
Or having an English news channel on in the background while you clean the house.
Exactly. They also highly recommend reading for pure pleasure.
Yes, and they specifically point to comic books or children's literature.
Which is controversial for some.
I know a lot of adult professionals bristle at the idea of reading a children's book. They think it's childish or beneath them, or that it won't help them in a corporate environment.
It is a very common prejudice, but linguistically it is misguided.
Why is that?
What low-intensity practice provides is volume. You need massive amounts of comprehensible input.
Language that you generally understand without intense effort.
Right. Children's books and comics provide perfect, grammatically correct narrative structures that wash over your brain, reinforcing the foundational syntax without exhausting you.
So the core argument from Oxford is that the danger lies entirely in imbalance.
Correct. If you only engage in high-intensity practice, you will burn out.
The cognitive fatigue will be overwhelming.
Your motivation will crash, and you will start finding excuses to skip your study sessions entirely.
On the other hand, if you only engage in low-intensity practice,
Which is the comfort zone for most people on the B2 plateau,
you will stagnate.
you are never encountering the linguistic friction required to force your brain to learn complex C1 level collocations.
You need the high-intensity sessions to tear the muscle and the low-intensity sessions to build the endurance.
That is a perfect analogy.
So how do we actually schedule this? The Oxford materials suggest building a realistic 1-hour daily plan for yourself.
And it starts with an audit.
Right, you have to audit your own energy levels. Are you sharpest at 7 a.m. with a cup of coffee? Or are you a night owl who focuses best at 11 p.m.?
Find your peak cognitive window.
And carve out just 10 to 20 minutes for that grueling high-intensity practice. Set a timer, work through a difficult text, get your feedback.
And then you take the remaining 40 minutes of your daily goal and stack it onto your existing habits.
Habit stacking?
You don't need to find extra time in your day. You just swap out the language of your current activities.
Listen to an English podcast while doing the laundry.
Spend 10 minutes reading the English comment section on a sports highlight video instead of your native language feed.
By separating the intense study from the relaxed exposure, you guarantee steady progress without sacrificing your sanity. Which naturally brings us to the question of resources. If I am dedicating my peak 15 minutes to high-intensity listening, what exactly should I be listening to?
We need authentic material.
Right. We have some fantastic resource guides from the Gambia College and Talkpal, and both of them aggressively point to the BBC Learning English platform.
If you want to break the plateau, they argue this is the gold standard.
It is hard to argue with that assessment. The BBC is a globally recognized journalistic and educational institution.
The material they produce offers an unparalleled opportunity to engage with authentic, highly accurate British English.
Structured specifically for learners, but dealing with real-world complexity. Let's break down their catalog so you listening know exactly where to start.
Where should we begin?
The most famous program is probably 6-Minute English.
Oh yeah, a classic.
This is a brilliant tool if you are sitting squarely at that intermediate level. They take a highly relevant topic.
Maybe the ethics of artificial intelligence or the psychology behind procrastination.
And they have a natural, albeit slightly slower-paced, conversation about it. It is perfectly contained within 6 minutes, making it ideal for a high-intensity session.
And if you want to focus purely on those tricky lexical chunks we discussed earlier, the English we speak is the show you want.
They dedicate entire episodes to deconstructing a single idiom or informal phrase.
If you are struggling to understand why your British colleagues say they need to bite the bullet or hit the nail on the head, this podcast breaks down the context, the tone, and the exact usage.
Then there is English at the News, which is phenomenal for professionals.
They take authentic news clips from reporters on the ground and extract the formal high-level vocabulary, explaining how it functions in a broadcast setting.
And for a quick grammar fix, English in a Minute provides rapid-fire, 60-second explanations of confusing grammar rules or easily mixed-up vocabulary pairs.
But again, we must apply the Oxford strategy here.
Right, active learning.
You do not just put 6-minute English on your headphones and go for a jog if you want it to be high-intensity practice.
You must utilize the architecture the BBC provides.
You download the transcript. You read along as the presenters speak.
You take the vocabulary quizzes on their website to get that mandatory feedback.
And, crucially, you practice shadowing.
Now, I have to ask about shadowing. I've seen videos of people doing this. They put on headphones and just loudly repeat every single word the speaker says, a fraction of a second behind them.
It looks a bit strange.
It does. It looks a bit like they are just parroting the audio. Doesn't that just make you a really good mimic? How does repeating a BBC news anchor help me have a dynamic conversation in real life?
I get that a lot.
Yeah.
It looks strange, but the mechanical benefit is profound. Shadowing is not about generating spontaneous thought.
It's not.
No, it is entirely about muscle memory and phonetic training.
Yo.
When you try to speak English, your mouth and tongue are fighting against decades of programming from your native language.
That makes sense.
By mimicking a native speaker, precisely matching their exact speed, their pauses, their rising and falling intonation, you are physically training your articulatory muscles to produce English sounds naturally.
So you are bypassing your brain's tendency to apply your native accent to English words.
Exactly. It is literally physical training for your mouth.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, to truly demonstrate what authentic C1 level audio looks like, we are going to look at a transcript from a YouTube news review produced by BBC Learning English.
This is the exact kind of material you should be using for your high-intensity transcript analysis.
Now, before we look at the specific headlines, we need to give a quick heads up.
Yes, very important context here.
The text we are about to analyze consists of real-world political news stories. It covers international relations, domestic policies, and border conflicts.
So just to be absolutely clear for everyone listening, our goal here is not to debate geopolitics or take a stance on any of these issues.
Right. We are not endorsing or criticizing any of the individuals, policies, or governments mentioned in the BBC's coverage.
Not at all. We are approaching this text strictly as a linguistic laboratory.
We just want to observe how professional journalists utilize advanced English to describe complex, often controversial situations.
Exactly. We are looking at the machinery of the language.
So let's dive into the first news item from the transcript. It covers Cardinal Robert Prevost taking the name Pope Leo XIV.
Right.
The text highlights that he is a Chicago-born missionary, making him the first U.S. pope, and notes that in his initial address, he emphasized peace and dialogue.
From a vocabulary standpoint, there's a fascinating C1 level collocation here. The text states his first words were uttered from the loggia of St. Peter's Basilica.
Uttered from.
A B2 learner would almost certainly just say spoken from or said from.
Right, you would never say, I uttered that I wanted a cup of coffee. It sounds ridiculous.
Exactly. Utter is a highly formal verb meaning to make a sound with your voice, and it is almost exclusively reserved for significant, solemn, or historical contexts.
So when a journalist uses uttered from, they are elevating the register of the text to match the gravity of the papal announcement.
The text also uses the noun papacy, mentioning he wore the traditional red cape of the papacy.
An advanced speaker needs to know these abstract nouns that refer to an office or authority rather than just knowing the word pope.
Let's move to the second news item, which is a massive shift in tone.
This one covers a trade deal between the U.S. and the U.K. The transcript details how the Trump administration rolled back tariffs on British steel and autos, and in exchange, the UK agreed to purchase Boeing jets and allow more agricultural access.
The language here is incredibly dense and competitive.
It is classic economic journalism.
The text uses the phrase imposed on allies and adversaries alike. Let's break that down. First, the collocation imposed on.
You don't just put a tax on someone in formal English.
No, you impose a rule, a tariff, or a burden on them.
And adversaries is such a powerful synonym for enemies or opponents. It sounds much more professional and strategic.
But the whole phrase, together allies and adversaries alike, is a brilliant structural chunk.
It is a highly sophisticated way of saying everyone, regardless of our diplomatic relationship with them.
The transcript also observes that the pact appeared to have been put together hastily.
This is a fantastic C1 adverb. A B2 learner would say it was put together quickly.
But hastily carries an embedded judgment.
What kind of judgment?
It means done with excessive speed or urgency, often implying a lack of careful consideration or proper procedure. It is much more descriptive than quickly.
We also see the words levy and exempt. A levy is a highly formal noun for a tax or a fee collected by a governmental authority.
And the text notes that UK steel will be exempt from this levy.
Right. If you are exempt, you are legally free from an obligation or liability that is imposed on others.
If you want to read the Financial Times or the Wall Street Journal, levy and exempt need to be in your active vocabulary.
The third news item demonstrates how language adapts to conflict. It covers a border situation in Kashmir, describing an artillery exchange between Indian and Pakistani forces.
The standout phrase here is heavy volleys of shells.
That is a very specific visual phrase. A volley isn't just a shot.
No, it is a large number of projectiles. Bullets, arrows, or artillery shells discharged simultaneously.
It creates a vivid picture of the intensity of the exchange.
The journalist also summarized the situation as a standoff.
A B2 learner might call it a fight or an argument.
But a standoff is a specific type of deadlock. It implies a situation where two equally matched opponents are facing each other, and neither side can move forward or win without severe consequences.
It is a precise descriptive noun that instantly conveys the tension of the geopolitical situation.
Let's look at the fourth item. This is a public health story discussing a drop in the infant mortality rate in the United States, which the report links to an RSV vaccine.
And just to provide a necessary context here, RSV stands for respiratory syncytial virus, a very common respiratory illness.
And the CDC, which is mentioned as the source of the data, is the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, a major national public health agency in the U.S.
The linguistic highlight here is how the text describes the statistics. It says the rate dropped after 2 years of hovering at a late pandemic plateau.
We mentioned the word plateau earlier, but look at the verb hovering.
To hover literally means to remain suspended in one place in the air, like a helicopter.
But in data analysis and journalism, it means to remain at or near a particular level, fluctuating slightly, but not making a significant move.
Hovering at a plateau is a masterclass in using visual verbs to describe abstract statistics.
The text also stresses that this conclusion is based on provisional data from the CDC.
Provisional is an absolute must-know adjective for academic or scientific reading.
It means arranged or existing for the present, with the explicit understanding that it may be changed later.
It is how scientists distinguish between preliminary findings and final, peer-reviewed results.
Finally, the fifth news item looks at domestic U.S. politics. It covers a bill in the House of Representatives, sponsored by Marjorie Taylor Greene, proposing to rename the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America.
The key vocabulary here revolves around the legislative process. The text states the bill is a step closer to codifying the push to rename the water.
To codify is a fantastic C1 verb.
It means to arrange laws or rules into a systematic code.
In the context of news, it means taking an abstract idea or a political push and turning it into an actual binding written law.
We also see the word measure used in its political sense. A B2 learner knows measure as a verb, like measuring the length of a table.
But here, it is a noun referring to a legislative bill or a formal plan of action. The text notes a representative voted against the measure.
It also states that House Democrats harshly criticized the decision.
Harshly criticized is an excellent adverb-verb collocation that perfectly captures strong, severe public disapproval.
Okay, that was a massive download of high-level vocabulary, but we need to connect this back to our overall strategy.
Oh, let's do that.
Why did we just spend time analyzing 5 completely different news stories, ranging from the Vatican to trade tariffs to health statistics?
Because it demonstrates how a C1 vocabulary is actually built. You are not just memorizing the definition of the word levy from a dictionary.
Right.
By engaging with authentic news, you are seeing levies surrounded by words like tariffs, adversaries, and exempt. You are building a massive, interconnected web of contextual associations.
This multi-layered context is what permanently anchors the vocabulary in your brain.
It provides the linguistic friction we talked about earlier.
And while engaging with the daily news is a fantastic habit, our sources indicate that to truly break the plateau, you have to go even deeper.
Short, 6-minute audio clips or 500-word news articles are perfect for that daily high-intensity sprint.
But advanced English requires understanding how language sustains complex arguments over a long period.
The BBC Resource Guide highly recommends committing to what they call a project book.
A project book. So this is a longer, complete work, usually nonfiction, that allows you to immerse yourself in an author's specific style.
It gives you the space to see how advanced vocabulary is connected to deeper emotional narratives, sustained logical arguments, and broad concepts.
When you read an entire book, you see the author use the same C1 collocations repeatedly across hundreds of pages, which naturally cements your understanding through repetition in different contexts.
The study guide we are looking at features a phenomenal project book, Contagious by Jonah Berger.
Oh yes, Contagious, Why Things Catch On. It is a highly regarded nonfiction book focusing on business, marketing, and psychology.
Berger investigates the underlying reasons why certain ideas, consumer products, or YouTube videos go massively viral, while others completely fail to gain traction.
From a linguistic perspective, this book sits perfectly in the B2 to C1 sweet spot.
It is written in modern, highly effective business English.
It avoids the incredibly dense, impenetrable jargon of a pure academic research paper, but it is entirely structured around complex psychological concepts and behavioral research.
The central architecture of the book is Berger's STEP PS framework.
It is an acronym breaking down the 6 principles of virality: social currency, triggers, emotion, public, practical value, and stories.
There was a beautifully simple quote from the book that the study guide highlights. When we care, we share.
Let's examine the specific vocabulary benefits of reading a project book like Contagious. You are going to absorb highly relevant marketing terminology.
You will encounter words like niche, referring to a specialized, highly targeted segment of the market.
You will learn the concept of brand equity, which describes the commercial value a company derives from how consumers perceive their brand name, rather than just the product itself.
You will also get a crash course in the language of psychology.
Words like bias, meaning a prejudice in favor of or against one thing.
Or cues, which are subtle signals or triggers that prompt a person to take action or recall a memory.
Beyond the raw vocabulary, a project book is a masterclass in observing advanced grammar functioning in its natural habitat.
You aren't just doing isolated grammar exercises. You are watching a professional writer use the passive voice correctly to describe the methodology of a psychological study.
You are seeing complex conditional sentences deployed to explain hypothetical marketing scenarios.
You see the mechanics of the language serving the ideas.
But just like the BBC audio, you cannot approach a project book the way you would casually read a paperback in your native language.
No, the source provides targeted study strategies based on where you currently sit on the plateau.
Let's imagine a listener who is at a strong B1 or a lower B2 level. What is their strategy?
At that stage, your primary objective is expanding your active vocabulary. The guide suggests a highly structured, manageable weekly plan.
Do not try to read a chapter a day.
Read 3 days a week and tackle only 5 to 7 pages per session.
As you read those pages, actively scan for collocations and physically underline 10 to 15 new words or chunks.
What?
And then what? You just close the book.
No, that is where the review phase comes in. You take 2 separate days of the week purely for review.
You take those 10 to 15 underlined words, transfer them into a notebook or a digital flashcard system.
And write 3 to 4 short sentences using those words in contexts relevant to your own life or career.
If you maintain that disciplined, slow pace, you will finish the book in about 8 to 10 weeks, and your active vocabulary will be transformed.
Now, what if a listener is already at a very strong B2 level, bumping right up against C1?
They probably already know words like bias or niche.
For the upper intermediate learner, the strategy shifts entirely. Your focus moves away from individual definitions and heavily toward precision, style, and flow.
The guide advises these readers to actively analyze the author's signpost phrases.
How does Berger transition from analyzing a failed marketing campaign to introducing a successful one?
You need to notice how he deploys phrases like first, finally, in contrast, consequently, or as a result.
These phrases are the structural beams of advanced, coherent communication.
And for their active practice, the guide recommends a really challenging exercise, summarizing entire chapters in just 3 to 4 sentences.
But the key is that you have to try and mimic Berger's specific writing style.
You are trying to capture his ability to take complex, multi-layered research and explain it elegantly and simply.
That constraint forces you to utilize the advanced syntax and signpost phrases you just absorbed.
Now, it is worth noting that while Contagious is excellent, behavioral marketing might not be everyone's passion.
True. The study guide lists several other high-caliber project books that offer a similar linguistic environment.
Yes, there are some fantastic alternatives. They mention Made to Stick by the Heath Brothers, which explores why certain ideas are memorable while others are forgotten.
There is Robert Cialdini's Influence, which is the absolute gold standard for understanding the psychology of persuasion.
If you are in the tech sector, Hooked by Near Ale provides incredible vocabulary for software design and habit formation.
They also recommend James Clear's Atomic Habits for mastering the language of personal development and behavioral change.
For pure business strategy, Blue Ocean Strategy is essential reading.
And for those interested in economics, probability, and high-level philosophy, Nassim Nicholas Taleb's works, specifically Anti-Fragile and The Black Swan, provide incredibly rich, complex, and sometimes confrontational English.
Any of these books will serve as a brilliant linguistic laboratory.
Okay, we are entering the final phase of our deep dive.
We have covered the cognitive psychology of collocations, the athletic training model of high and low intensity practice, the value of authentic news audio, and the sustained immersion of project books.
But there is one final critical layer required to truly secure that C1 rating.
We need to talk about polishing your academic and professional register.
To do this, we are looking at the strategic tips provided by ITES.
As a reminder, ITES stands for the Inter-University Test of Academic English. It is a rigorous proficiency exam used by universities.
However, even if you have no intention of ever setting foot in a university lecture hall again, the skills required to pass the ITES are the exact same skills required to sound authoritative, educated, and highly professional in a corporate environment.
This section is entirely about mastering register, understanding the vast chasm between casual spoken English and formal written English.
The ITES materials start with vocabulary, and they point to a very specific tool, the academic word list, commonly known as the AWL.
If you haven't heard of this, it is a famous, meticulously compiled list of 570 word families that appear with the highest frequency across academic and professional texts.
If you want to write a corporate white paper or read a scientific journal, mastering the AWL is non-negotiable.
And tying everything back to our very first segment, the ITAS guide strictly warns against learning the AWL words in isolation.
They recommend using a dedicated collocations dictionary, like osdic.com.
When you learn the academic word hypothesis, you must simultaneously learn that in English, you reject a hypothesis, confirm a hypothesis, or formulate a hypothesis.
You don't just have findings from a study. You have inconclusive findings or preliminary findings.
Moving from vocabulary to structure, the ITAS tips place a massive emphasis on coherence and flow in writing.
This involves mastering your linking words.
And there is a specific, highly mechanical grammatical distinction they highlight that constantly trips up B2 learners.
It is the difference between using a conjunction and using an adverb to connect two ideas.
This is a classic hurdle that immediately signals to an examiner or a native reader whether you are at a B2 or C1 level.
Let's analyze the exact example provided in the text. Consider this sentence. It is possible to start a PhD at different points throughout the year, although most students start in the autumn.
Okay, in that structure, the word although is functioning as a conjunction.
Right. It is connecting two dependent clauses into one single flowing sentence.
Mechanics-wise, you have a comma right before although, and the sentence continues.
Now, compare the mechanics of that sentence to this alternative. It is possible to start a PhD at different points throughout the year. However, most students start in the autumn.
That is a complete structural shift.
However is an adverb. It cannot glue two clauses together in the same way.
You must put a hard period after year. The first sentence completely ends.
Then, you start an entirely new sentence with a capitalized bonus. However, immediately followed by a comma.
If you write a corporate email and you use however with a comma before it, treating it like the conjunction although, it acts as a massive speed bump for the reader.
It physically disrupts the mechanical flow of the text.
This focus on precise mechanics leads directly into the concept of register shifting.
The ITAS materials provide a brilliant contrast to show how a B2 learner might express an idea verbally versus how a C1 user must express that exact same idea in a formal written document.
Let's listen to the spoken example first. Imagine a student saying this in a casual meeting. If students were asked to be more involved in the lessons, then these would probably be more interesting, but this also means we should come to class prepared, so we really have something useful to say.
It communicates the idea perfectly well, but it is rambling.
It relies on basic, lower-level vocabulary like involved, interesting, and useful.
And crucially, it is strung together with informal, conversational linking words like but and so.
Now listen to the C1 translation of that exact same thought, optimized for formal written English. Increased student involvement could result in more interesting lectures. However, this requires students to attend classes well prepared in order to contribute to the discussion.
That transformation is the essence of the B2 to C1 jump.
We took the clunky, passive spoken phrase students were asked to be more involved and condensed it into the powerful noun phrase increased student involvement.
We eliminated the casual but and deployed the formal adverb. However, starting a new sentence.
We upgraded have something useful to say to the highly professional collocation contribute to the discussion.
It is concise, precise, and carries significantly more authority.
The ITEST guide also flags 3 highly specific, persistent grammatical errors.
These are the annoying pitfalls that linger in a learner's brain even after years of study, and they will absolutely tank your C1 rating if you don't eradicate them.
The first is a sneaky subject-verb agreement issue in complex sentences.
This error happens when the subject of the sentence is separated from the verb by other words.
A text gives this example. The assignments and the coursework throughout the year is very challenging.
A B2 learner's brain sees the singular word year sitting right next to the verb and automatically selects the singular verb is.
But the actual subject of that sentence is way back at the beginning, the assignments and the coursework.
That is a plural subject.
So the sentence must be, the assignments and the coursework throughout the year are very challenging.
You have to train your brain to look past the immediate noun and find the true subject.
The second major pitfall is tense confusion, specifically blurring the lines between the past simple and the present perfect.
Advanced learners frequently make the mistake of saying, "Last year, I have completed my bachelor's degree."
Oh, I hear that one all the time.
It is incredibly common. The rule is absolute. If you specify a finished, closed period of time in the past, like last year or in 2020, you must use the past simple.
It has to be last year I completed.
You can only use the present perfect if the time period connects to the present, such as, over the past few weeks, I have worked on my dissertation.
The final grammatical trap is confusing adjectives and adverbs when modifying actions. You will hear learners say, the professor explained these concepts very clear.
Which is incorrect, because the word is modifying the verb explained. You need the adverb form.
It must be the professor explained these concepts clearly.
You only use the adjective clear if you are modifying the noun, as in the professor gave a clear explanation.
Under the pressure of a fast-paced conversation, the B2 brain mixes these up constantly, and it requires high-intensity practice to correct the habit.
Finally, just to round out the academic perspective, the ITAS source touches on spoken English in formal environments.
Like giving a presentation or answering a difficult question in a board meeting.
You have to master verbal signposting. You cannot just start talking. You need to provide a roadmap for your audience.
Using phrases like, let's start by taking a look at or, there are two main issues to consider.
That demonstrates to your listeners and to the examiners that you are in complete, calm control of both the language and the structure of your argument.
And if you are taking a data-driven test, like the IELTS or the ITES, or if you regularly present financial data, you must learn the specific, high-level terminology for describing charts and graphs.
You cannot just say numbers went up or went down.
You need to know when data fluctuates, when a market plummets, when profits soar, and how two data points correlate.
That precision is the hallmark of advanced English.
We have truly covered a massive expanse of linguistic territory today. Let's do a highly focused recap to make sure these strategies stick.
If you're determined to break out of the intermediate plateau, you need a holistic, multi-pronged attack.
First, abandon the habit of learning isolated words. Your primary goal is now acquiring collocations and lexical chunks.
Second, audit your daily study routine. You must balance the grueling, feedback-driven 15-minute high-intensity sessions with hours of relaxed, comprehensible, low-intensity exposure.
Third, challenge your ear with complex, authentic audio like the BBC Learning English news reviews, and practice shadowing to retrain your articulatory muscles.
Fourth, commit to a long-form project book like Contagious to observe how advanced vocabulary sustains complex ideas over hundreds of pages.
And finally, actively drill your formal register by utilizing the academic word list and systematically hunting down and eliminating those lingering grammatical bad habits.
As we bring this deep dive to a close, I want to offer a final, perhaps slightly provocative perspective shift.
I love those.
We have spent this entire session meticulously detailing how to study English. We have looked at mechanics, cognitive load, and study schedules.
Right.
But consider this. What if the ultimate secret to mastering an advanced language isn't actually about studying the language itself?
What do you mean?
What if, to truly inhabit the C1 level, you must stop treating English as a subject to be memorized and start treating it purely as a utilitarian tool?
A tool for what?
Think of it as a lens through which you view the world. When you use English not to learn English, but to learn other complex, fascinating subjects, whether that is behavioral marketing, international geopolitics, or quantum physics, the plateau begins to dissolve.
Wow.
The language stops being an obstacle and simply becomes the invisible vehicle for your curiosity.
That is an incredibly empowering way to look at it. Stop studying the language and start using the language to study the world. Thank you so much for joining us on this extensive linguistic journey today. We sincerely hope that these frameworks and strategies provide you with the exact tools you need to shatter that invisible wall and finally command the language with the authority and precision you have been working toward.
Remember, in language acquisition, consistency is always your greatest superpower.
It absolutely is. And we want to hear how you are applying these techniques in your own routines. So, if you found this deep dive helpful, please share it with a fellow language learner who might be stuck on that same plateau.
We'd love to read your comments too.
Definitely. Drop a comment with your favorite new collocation and make sure you subscribe to the daily English practice feed so you never miss our next deep dive. Keep practicing, keep noticing those lexical chunks, and we will see you next time.